Next curve.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Rethink podcast. I'm Leonard Lee, Managing Director of NextCurve, and today I have a very special guest, John Kindervag, SVP of Cybersecurity Strategy at Onto-It, joining me today to talk about one of the most talked about things in tech today, Zero Trust. And John, thank you so much for joining me today. It's quite an honor. I consider you the James Brown of Zero Trust. You are like the godfather.
There we go.
Zero Trust brother number one. And so why don't you take this moment to introduce yourself for those of you who don't, our audience who don't know who you are, and let them know more about your background and the work that you're currently doing at Onto-It.
Yeah. So again, I'm John Kindervag. I'm currently SVP at Onto-It, which does Zero Trust Managed Services. Before that, I just got off a 4-year run at Palo Alto Networks, which was really wonderful. I was the field CTO, bringing Zero Trust to the masses and working with the company that I found was the best technology for deploying Zero Trust, Palo Alto Networks. And before that, I was at Forrester Research for 8.5 years. So that's where I created Zero Trust and just did the primary research on it, started the whole journey. And then before that, I was a network engineer, security engineer, pen tester, all those different jobs that really informed what became Zero Trust, because I'd had that background as a practitioner. So when I was tasked with throwing away the box and thinking about what are the fundamental problems that we need to solve in IT and cybersecurity, I was able to come up with these ideas, notably Zero Trust, which of course people made fun of me, Leonard, for a long time, told me I was crazy, and I just persisted. And now it's this movement that is so gone beyond what I ever thought it would be.
Yeah, definitely. So how does it feel? How does it feel to be sort of this godfather of a celebrity concept, a tech concept?
It's a very strange feeling, right? Because you're gratified and humbled.
Right.
But at the same time, it gets out of your control, and you hear a lot of I hear a lot of misinformation, things that don't do the industry very good. They don't do the clients. They don't benefit the clients. So that's frustrating. So it's a mix of profound gratitude and humility, and at the same time, a lot of frustration from what people have done with the term and the concept and what they've missed.
Right, and that's one of the reasons why we have you on today, right? We're going to give you a forum to vent. But thank you so much for that. So let's talk about what we're going to be discussing. And so the agenda for our discussion will be, first, John will help us reset our understanding of Zero Trust and what it really is. Then what we'll do is we'll talk about the criteria for applying Zero Trust to your network. And so John will share his insights and his experience as well as his knowledge on how to figure out, well, where does it make sense to think about Zero Trust within your business and your networks. And then what we'll do is we'll talk about how you implement Zero Trust and maintain it. And then we'll wrap things up with what are some of the key capabilities, either current and emerging, that are needed for Zero Trust. And then we'll wrap it up with that. So how's that sound?
Sounds perfect.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get started with the first topic, which is the resetting of our understanding of Zero Trust. And John, everywhere I go, I hear we are Zero Trust this, we're Zero Trust that. It's really becoming a pervasive term and qualification that pretty much everyone up and down the technology stack is going to market with. Now, I'm just curious, why and how did you come up with Zero Trust? And what was the trigger that really brought this about?
Well, I mean, it really started in my practitioner days installing firewalls. And even today, usually interfaces are defined as trusted and untrusted and various levels of trust, right?
Right.
So that really frustrated me as a practitioner, because now here's this variable that I have to determine arbitrarily about the trust level of an interface back in the early days of firewalls, like, and that would determine how you set it up and what policies you put in place. So if you were going from a high trust level, the internal network, to a low trust level, say the external network, the internet, or even a DMZ, you didn't need any policy. There was no need for an outbound policy. And that really frustrated me. And I thought, this is a stupid idea. Why do we use this word trust? Why do we apply this to policy? And when I got to Forrester and I was tasked with looking at these things, I would talk to people about, what is your security strategy? What are you doing? What are you trying to accomplish? And everybody would say, well, we abide by this idea of trust but verify. And okay, trust, I get, means I'm not actually going to do anything. And I asked one CIO or CISO, maybe, I said, so I get that trust means you're just going to open up the whole network to everybody, right? Because I'm a former pen tester, and so if I could get on your network, I could get access to everything on your network, right?
Yeah.
And there was no boundaries in place to control my access. So I get that, but what are you doing to verify? And he said this. He said, well, we don't actually do any verification because they're trusted users. That would be rude, right? So he had conflated human ideas into the network, and that's what everybody was doing. And so then I said, well, why do you do trust but verify? And he said, well, because Ronald Reagan said to do it. And I thought, oh yeah, Ronald Reagan, that great cybersecurity expert, right? I mean, and so I started doing the primary research, and Ronald Reagan never said trust but verify. He said he was talking to Mikhail Gorbachev at an event they were doing. I think it was some kind of nuclear disarmament treaty.
Yeah, wasn't that the SALT treaty?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, trust but verify for determining whether or not the Soviets were disarming or dismantling their nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
But
he said we're going to abide by that old Russian proverb, and my Russian is really bad. So, but we're going to abide by that old Russian proverb, "Dovranai no provranai," which means trust but verify. And then everybody laughs because it literally translates into trust but verify, right? And I just did the Google Cloud podcast with Anton Shivak, and he was talking, he's Russian, so he's talking about Russians like this rhyming in their proverbs, right? So that's the whole reason it exists, because it rhymes, but it means the exact opposite of the literal translation. It means we're not going to be trusting you at all. Right. We're going to always be looking over your shoulder. That was the message that he was portraying. But we just took it as our mantra and ran with it without understanding it contextually. Oh. And so that was kind of the key point for me.
Wow.
It happened at an event, actually at a restaurant that was on the water right next to the Statue of Liberty. I remember looking out at the Statue of Liberty at that moment and thinking, this is crazy. So I started doing this research. I spent about 2 years doing primary research, talking to people, testing the concepts in speeches and webinars, and then wrote the original Zero Trust paper, which was called No More Chewy Centers back in 2010. Because you remember we always talked about, network should be like an M&M, hard and crunchy on the outside and soft and chewy on the inside. And like, no, it shouldn't, right? That's just a bad metaphor. So that's where it all started. And I did a lot of work in that area. I wrote a lot of reports about Zero Trust. I did a lot of design work, and everything that's come from there is following out of that. So I call that authentic Zero Trust, to kind of distinguish from what the other vendors are putting spin on it, right?
Wonderful. It's always a restaurant where you come up with the best ideas, right?
Yeah.
But that whole scene that you laid out could have made for a perfect movie scene when you do a biographical, a movie about you and Zero Trust,
That would be really boring.
That would be my favorite.
My wife wouldn't even go see that. So,
Well, I know a lot of security folks who, cybersecurity folks who would see it. So,
But if you think about this word trust, this is what I pondered. What does trust mean? And I would ask people, what does it mean?
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to describe, but really what it is human emotion, right?
Yeah.
That we've injected into digital systems for no reason. I mean, somebody just arbitrarily chose that term. Right. And then we talk about, we anthropomorphized the network, right? So we say, John is on the network, Leonard is on the network, but we're not. You're in San Diego, I'm in Dallas. We haven't left our seats.
Yeah.
We haven't been turned into a subatomic particle. We haven't been sent across the public internet so that we can communicate via video conference. That's not what's happened, right? So packets asserted to come from us have been generated by a device. Yeah. So I would say no person has ever been on a network. And when people accuse me of zero trust, saying that people aren't trustworthy, I say, no, it doesn't say that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying people are not packets. We have to decouple the idea that people are equated to the devices that generate packets. And it's that simple. So we're just trying to eliminate, first of all, the word trust from your vocabulary. So zero trust doesn't make a system trusted. It eliminates the concept of trust because that word itself causes us to do things that are not in our best interest as we build and maintain these kinds of environments.
Wow, that's deep. I'm tripping out right now. That's very, very interesting background information. So let's talk about, you mentioned misconceptions. What are some of the ones that you see out there? And what are some of the suggestions that you have for us to ask better questions as we hear these zero trust claims that are packaged in misconceptions?
Yeah. So, the first one is that there are zero trust products. There aren't. Zero trust is a strategy and a framework that you use to think about cybersecurity and ultimately design specific environments, no matter where the data or asset resides. So there's no zero trust products. There are products that work well in zero trust environments. There's products that don't work very well for multitude of reasons, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing, zero trust is about identity, and that really comes out of a lot of vendors who have spun it to equal identity. And I did say in the original paper, I talked about the core principles, control access on a need to know basis and inspect and log all that traffic. But people took that control access on a need to know basis, privileged access, or whatever you want to call it, lots of terms out there, and just ran with that and said, here's what zero trust is. And that's not true, right? And I can prove that with two words. Leonard. Snowden, Manning. They were trusted users on trusted devices, right? They had the right patch level. They had the right antivirus or endpoint software, whatever it was. They had powerful, robust identity systems. They had really extremely powerful multi-factor authentication systems, much more powerful than you would use in a corporation. And yet no one looked at their packets post-authentication. So no one knew what they were doing. No one knew what they were stealing. They were even on an air-gapped network. Yeah. So we automatically prove that identity isn't the answer. It's part of how we write policy and we consume it within zero trust policy. But identity doesn't solve the problem because there was no question about the identity of Snowden and Manning on the networks where they did bad things. It was what are they doing and what needs to be protected that no one asked the question about.
So, you asked the question, what is trust? So obviously there is an identity aspect to it. So are you saying that the other element is understanding or having visibility or some understanding of intent of that party? Is that what trust is?
Well, I mean,
or does trust?
I don't even use the word trust, right? I talk about confidence in a system, right? So zero trust is a system. And so what we're doing is we're doing a number of things based upon what we're protecting, right? So one of the other key elements of zero trust is that we design the network from the inside out instead of the outside in. So we've always designed from the outside in. We started at the edge whether that is the internet edge, the router handoff, or maybe the endpoint edge, and design inwards. And we never got to the thing we're protecting. So zero trust is about protecting something. And most people don't think that because we're predisposed to think about security should be on the endpoint or security should be at the internet because that's where the first threats were.
Yeah.
But really, when I'm doing work, I was just on a call with, a few weeks ago with a foreign government. And there was a whole bunch of so-called experts on there talking about where you put their product in a zero trust network. And finally, I just interjected and I asked, what are you guys trying to protect? And they just ground to a halt. Well, we haven't thought about that yet. Well, that's the first thing. That's all that matters is what you're going to protect. So that's where, in the 5-step methodology that I created at Forrester and I continued on through Palo Alto Networks and I use every day today, the first thing we do is define the protect surface. What should we protect? Because everybody else is focused on the attack surface, but that's unmanageable, right? I hear these products, attack surface management. Well, really? How are you going to control things that you don't actually have any ability to control? What can I control? I can control the thing I'm going to protect. So I can shrink the attack surface down orders of magnitude to something that is very, very small and easily known. And I call that a protect surface. It's an inversion of the concept of attack surface. Everybody else is worried about attacks, and there's enough people worried about attacks. I'm worried about what I need to be protecting. Right?
Wow.
And so I call that a DAS element. So DAS is an acronym. It stands for data that I need to protect. Anything that's sensitive, confidential, falls under a compliance mandate, will get me in trouble with the regulator. The second thing is an application I need to protect. Typically, applications that use sensitive data or control sensitive systems. Then there might be assets I need to protect. IT, IoT, OT. IMOT. I mean, there's so many acronyms that we've created. They all run on TCP/IP, so we don't need to fragment this environment. We just need to apply policy based upon the asset, the application, and then finally there are services we need to protect. DNS, DHCP, Active Directory, Exchange servers would be an example, right? Why are we having this problem with this attack on Exchange servers? Because we haven't been protecting the Exchange servers. Right? We just let them, people would deploy them wherever and not think about protecting them because they're not an endpoint. They're not a user. But they're fundamental to our organization. How do we exchange? We still communicate primarily through email. And so once you understand what a DAS element is and you put a single DAS element in a single protect surface, I can build out my zero trust environment one protect surface at a time. So it can be done incrementally. It's done iteratively, one after another, and it's non-disruptive. I'm not going to break anything because I'm not starting too big. And that's the key, is the concept of the protect surface.
Okay. All right. And so why don't we segue into our second topic, which are the criteria for applying zero trust in your network. And, some people say that zero trust is difficult, and maybe this is because they have a misconception of what zero trust is. But but I'll let you speak to that. But it is. Here's one of the things that I've noticed. It seems like people speak about zero trust in sort of an all or nothing type of way. Is that the case? And if not,
that's the case of how they speak about it, but that's not how they should do it. Failures in zero trust are because you took too big of a bite of the elephant or the whale, whatever your favorite consumption metaphor is, right? And so you do it one protect surface at a time. So zero trust is very simple, right? There's a 5-step methodology that you use to deploy it in any environment, right? And so whether that's in an on-premise network or a private cloud, public cloud, SaaS environment, SD-WAN, endpoint, those are the only places where data and assets live, right? And so what I do is I define the protect surface for a single DAS element. So let's take cardholder data. right, for credit card information. So where are my PANs, my credit card information stored? That's called the cardholder data network. Now I've defined that. So now the second step is mapping the transaction flows. How does that work together as a system? Because what I found is most people don't know how that system works. And so failures often occur because they break the system, right? They think it's much simpler than it is, and there's a lot of complexity. I mean, I was once involved in a project for a restaurant for PCI, and the whole network went down because somebody said, "Hey, what's this server doing? This is an old server. We need to pull this out." Well, that server was an intermediary server between 3,000 different restaurant point of sale systems to the backend database. And so by taking it out, you broke the whole system, right? And everybody's like, "How did we break it?" And a bunch of people, well, Zero Trust broke it. No, the fact that you didn't know how your system worked broke it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then from there, we architect that environment, that Zero Trust environment, no matter where it is. So we put in the proper controls based upon the thing we're trying to protect. And so that control might be a next generation firewall. It might be an endpoint solution. It might be an identity solution. It could be any kind of solution that we have. We might need that based upon, again, the protect surface. And then the fourth step is defining the policy. So we can get very granular policies,
Right.
that I call Kipling method policies. So Rudyard Kipling, the writer, gave us the idea of who, what, when, where, why, and how back in 1902 in a poem.
Right.
And so I use that as a cross-cultural, cross-language way to articulate how to create policy in new ways. Let's define a who statement. Who should have access to a resource? Let's define a what statement. By what application should they have access to that resource, that protect surface? Who, what, when, time rules. We don't do enough time rules, time limited rules, right? A lot of times when you look at hacking logs, data breach logs, you'll see that event occurred when most people were gone and no one was looking at anything, right? So that rule was only accessed by malicious actors. Who, what, when, where is that resource located? We need to know the answer to that. Most people don't know where their cardholder data is. They kind of guess, but it could be anywhere. And then finally, how? What is the criteria that we're going to allow this traffic to have access to it? We're going to inspect it at layer 7. It's got an attachment, so we're going to run it through a sandbox, maybe. We're going to put some DLP on it. Multiple different sets of criteria that we're going to apply in policy to make sure that the guardrails are appropriate for that particular packet. Because again, it's just a packet coming into a system, accessing a resource.
Right.
And so when you understand how TCP/IP works, you can understand how to apply that policy. And so that's the fourth step. And then finally, the fifth step is monitor and maintain. So we're going to constantly look at what's happening across this entire environment for this protect surface and ingest logs and various kinds of events and do machine learning against it and constantly refine it. We're going to essentially create a feedback loop so that we can maybe refine the protect surface a little bit more. Maybe we need to change the policy a little bit, or maybe there's a new control we need to add. And so that makes it anti-fragile. So if you're familiar with the concept of anti-fragility, Taleb wrote a book called Anti-Fragile, the idea that a system can be made stronger and stronger over time, the more it's under load and the more you know about it. And so that gives me a way to talk about what I'm trying to do. A Zero Trust is an anti-fragile cybersecurity environment. The Zero Trust environment is anti-fragile.
So in a way, is that like learning? It's like a learning system. It learns is that what you're suggesting? Or?
Yeah, I mean, we use machine learning in that system. And I don't know that learning is the exact term because it's kind of machine learning is kind of misused.
But it gives us. But I'm not suggesting that necessarily. It's not that it's a particular type of technology for learning. Just conceptually that as the system experiences more and more things, that you learn more about the system and the environment, and then you're making changes and you're adapting.
Yeah, that's absolutely what's happening. Like in our managed system, like what I'm doing now is, I think to make it more consumable, it needed to be a managed service. So that's why I came over to Ontoit, who has been building this out. And I've known those guys for a decade now and been working with them across 2 other companies. So have a very strong alignment around zero trust. But in the system that we've built, as we see more things, we're going to send a message to the client saying, hey, we need to refine this policy. It's too open, or we don't have any visibility into this. There's things where we need to readjust things. We need another control there, or there's a whole lot of different things that we could do to help them out in a more automated way.
Okay, wonderful. And so let's move on to topic 3, which is how do you implement zero trust and maintain it? I know that you've touched on some of those points, but in terms of a methodology and a way that organizations can start to approach zero trust, I know that you mentioned this 5-step process. Maybe you can talk about that. And then what are some of your thoughts on the maintenance aspect of it? Because obviously, it's one thing to actually get down this path, and I don't know if there's a maturity curve that you think of or that you suggest to your clients, but there's this curve that you're on to get to a certain level of zero trust within your environment, and then you have to maintain it, right? And so maybe you could speak to some of the frameworks that are out there that you've developed or you've seen others develop on top of a zero trust concept, and then the whole maintenance best practices piece.
Yeah, so it all comes down again to this 5-step model, right? So define the protect surface, map the transaction flows, architect the environment, create the policy, monitor, and maintain, right? So the maintenance is built into the flow. And so if you think of that protect surface as a variable in an equation, right? It's a variable X. So all we're doing is solving for X, each individual protect surface. And so architecturally, what we're trying to do is answer those 5 questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. And there's no prescriptive technology really, because there's different ways to accomplish this based upon that protect surface. Again, that's why architecting the zero trust environment is the 3rd step, not the 1st step. So traditionally, how we learned to design networks is we had reference architectures, right? So when you studied for your exams, you would study these reference architectures, and basically all you did is you looked at what the vendor had created, and you changed the IP address to meet your customer, how your customer had done their IP mappings, and it wasn't very effective. And so essentially you're building a bunch of square holes, and your customer has round pegs, and they say, how do we make them fit? And you say, well, you have to whittle. You have to make it fit what we've pre-designed for you. And in zero trust, everything is tailor-made based upon the thing we're protecting. So sometimes we might, most often the most common technology that I need is what's called a segmentation gateway, which is what I called a next generation firewall. Before there were next generation firewalls, a gateway that segments networks layers 2 through 7 based upon users, applications, or data, right? And these can be physical segmentation gateways, PSGs, or virtual segmentation gateways, VSGs. And a VSG can go into various parts of a cloud, a VPC. It can go into a virtual network infrastructure like VMware, or it can go into a container even. So there's multiple ways to deploy these technologies, but that's where I get the most visibility and control, is because I have actual layer 7 capability. And one of the things that we see, especially in native cloud solutions, is they're just leveraging the Linux kernel, which has an IP tables firewall, and I'm doing the air quotes thing there, because it's not really a firewall. It's a access control list. It's an ACL, and it's not even stateful. It doesn't even maintain state. So we're going back to the world prior to the mid 90s, when Checkpoint invented the stateful packet filtering firewall. We're going far back into the 20th century, and thinking that it's probably good enough. And we've lost the lessons of the past. I was talking to one of the original pen testing gurus a few months ago, and he said it feels like it's the 1990s again. We've lost our way. We think that all the things that didn't work in the past are good enough for the future, and all the attackers know how to bypass these controls. So we need to think about this from an attacker perspective. How would they get through a particular control to get access to a resource to exfiltrate the data? Because this is what it's all about: is how can they steal data, right?
Yeah.
Monetize data. There's a lot of disruption going on. We saw that in this week with the attack, on the nuclear processing system.
Iranian nuclear.
Yeah, but those are less common, and they're not going to happen to you, the average enterprise customer, right? Nobody's going to try to bring down your centrifuges, because you better not be having centrifuges that are spinning to refine plutonium for nuclear weapons. But the attacks that you're going to suffer are typically about stealing your data or disrupting your environment for some reason or another. Right. And so how are they going to get access to that? How do those systems work? And what controls can we put in place to mitigate those? Those are the questions that I am asking.
Okay. And so why don't we move on to topic 4, which is what are the key capabilities needed for Zero Trust, and and implementing Zero Trust and managing it, I guess, scale. Because I think one of the questions that oftentimes comes up is, can you scale out a Zero Trust practices within and implementation, if you will, within a network or environment? So if you don't mind sharing some of your perspectives there.
Yeah, I mean, like I said already, there's certain technologies that you're going to use depending upon the protect surface. But scalability, we live in an era where it's easy to scale things. And so Zero Trust is functionally scale free because of all these technological advancements that have happened. Cloud services, for example, our managed services deployed in a cloud environment in Kubernetes, so I can move that around wherever I need to based upon maybe a regulation for a particular customer. I can spin up a new managed service, fairly quickly, and it's scalable across the world. And then I think one of the other big advancements that's happened that we don't really call out enough is the creation of APIs, right? Mm-hmm. So in the old days, when I first started as a tadpole in the primordial soup of cybersecurity, you had to have specific product integrations that were very difficult to do. Now you have APIs, and somebody opens up an API and I can create an integration to that. And so that is the secret sauce that links everything together systemically. And so if it has an API, for example, we could probably manage it. And so that management now becomes scale free. And so what you want to think about of Zero Trust is it's a system. It needs to be collaborative. It needs to include, when you're designing and building it, it needs to include business leaders, not just technologists, because this is a strategy that resonates to the highest level of any organization. Right. I've talked to CEOs and board members and generals and admirals and all kinds of people about it, and they sometimes get it easier than technologists do. So it's not just about the technology; it's about the mission, the business, right? And then create a team that's going to work together to solve the business problems using these principles, and automatically you will determine what is the best technology for that protect surface if you have an open mind to it, right? And that's kind of the hardest thing to do, is to be open to new things, because cybersecurity, to me, is often the most old school of businesses in IT or in technology, right? I mean, the only thing that we do the same in technology today as we did in the 20th century is networks and cybersecurity in many ways, right? We don't write applications in COBOL and Fortran anymore, I mean, right? We don't do any of those. We constantly are propelling innovation in other areas, but not in networks, right? And so we have the old paradigms in the networks. So that means we have the old security paradigms because the old networks exist. And then we're very reluctant to move off of that. And so oftentimes I'm just trying to open up people's minds to the possibilities of how they protect their data or their assets or their applications for the betterment of their entire business, right? Because these are business issues. And the only thing, Leonard, that IT can do to get a CEO fired is to allow a data breach. Right? CEOs get fired over data breaches. Target, Equifax, TalkTalk, Ashley Madison, the head of OPM. They don't get fired over ransomware attacks. They might fire people, but they don't get fired. And so we need to understand how to align with the business. And this gives us a strategic way to do it. And so that's probably the first thing that I would tell people is think of the strategic value, because now you can go talk to your CEO and your board, and they all have a cybersecurity initiative inside that board.
So is that really step zero? Is that whole governance piece?
Yeah, that is step zero, right?
It almost always is, right?
Yeah,
it should be. Not that everyone does it, but
well, and how you define that as a process is can be a struggle for a lot of companies. So there's a whole maturity model tied behind these 5 steps. So I use a traditional 5-step CMM model, where actually 6 steps, because step 0 is readiness. Am I ready to do this? How mature am I? But that's not often germane to the people deploying zero trust.
Right.
But so there's a maturity model. How mature am I in each of these 5 steps? Do I know the protect surface? How mature is my policy? Those things. And so if I can understand that, I can then take that to the board or to my boss or whoever it is, and I can say, here's how we're doing against these goals. Here's why I need more budget. Right. I can do a lot of things when I can actually tell them what I'm actually accomplishing in this.
Right. You can also do a lot of things if you have budget.
But budget is actually easier to get if you can give a person a reason to give you the budget.
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean, oftentimes people say, "Haven't I spent enough money on cybersecurity?" And the answer is yes. You've spent enough money in reality, but you haven't spent it in the right ways, and so a lot of that is sunk costs that you'll never get back. Yeah. So, and we're so worried about that money that we don't realize the consequences are much greater than any of the capex that we'll spend in cybersecurity, for example, right? I mean, it will cost more in lawyers than it would to mitigate any particular risk that you have at any given time. And you don't calculate that into your cost model.
Yeah, right.
And actually, that's an area of research I'm doing, because I'm still doing research as an Onto-It fellow. And I'm doing research on that particular issue of how much it costs for when the lawyers get involved after a data breach,
right,
or any significant issue. There's always going to be lawyers, and so legal fees need to be calculated into all this thing. Audit fees need to be calculated into this, and all we look at is the acquisition cost of technology, and that's not the right way to do it. So recently, I've had calls from CISOs and executives. My CFO says I'm underspending in security. What's the answer? Well, the answer is you probably are, right? A very small percentage of your IT budget goes to security, and yet security is probably the most important part of your IT budget.
Right. Yeah. Wow. And so really quickly, before we wrap up here, what are some and this is for our techie, the techie side of our audience, what are some of the emerging capabilities or technologies that you see that are getting you excited, or that you think are interesting, that you feel will make zero trust easier to apply, implement, maintain, et cetera, et cetera? Anything that you see on the horizon?
Well, certainly machine learning technologies have been huge. We have to automate this. I often use a scene from the movie The Imitation Game about breaking the Nazi Enigma code when the character of Alan Turing says, what if only a machine can defeat another machine? And our adversaries are highly automated, and we have to build a machine to defeat that. So machine learning technologies and under, good ones that really understand what the packet is doing are the biggest advancement that we've had. Now, of course, again, it's overhyped a little bit in terms of what it can do, but I think that's a huge thing. And then, of course, to be self-serving, I think the future is doing zero trust as a managed service, which is why I made the leap to a managed services company to pioneer that, because to me that was the next thing in making it consumable. And so those two things to me were the missing pieces that I was looking for. And ultimately, when I was at Palo Alto, we added that machine learning capability and that insight, and now that's, to me, okay, I have to do this next step. It's part of that zero trust journey for me as well.
Wow. Okay. Wonderful. That's wonderful insight. And thank you for letting us get into the mind of John Kindervag. Right? I think you mispronounced your own name.
Kindervag? I say it quickly, right? I mean, it's Norwegian. It's supposed to have 2 A's in it, and a whole Ellis Island's backstory there. But as long as you get kind of close, I'm happy, right?
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Hopefully, I did a good job.
You did.
Yeah. Okay. Well, John, thanks again for joining me. And why don't you take a moment to let our audience know how they can reach out to you, find out more about Zero Trust, and the work that you're doing at Ontoit. And also, I don't know if the maturity models and some of these other artifacts that you're talking about, frameworks, are available.
We've created, when I was at Palo Alto Networks, I created a Zero Trust dictionary for the U.S. federal government. And that's probably the best single thing to look at. And I'll give that to you, that link, so you can give it out to your audience. And then the best way to get a hold of me, is through Twitter or at Kindervag, KINDERVAG. That's an easy way, or through LinkedIn, or go to Ontoit, it.net, and that's our website. So.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you. And to our listeners and viewers, thanks for joining us. Please subscribe to our YouTube and Apple podcast channels, and visit us at www.next-curve.com. And until next time, be safe, stay healthy, and we will see you the next time. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
Visit us at www.next-curve.com.